So, welcome. I'm Ava Hunt.
I'm Tilly Branson.
And we are both writers, co-writers, and I was performing, and Tilly was directing and dramaturg on Acting Alone, which you're about to see. So
we thought we'd kind of start this short introduction by maybe Ava, if you could talk a little bit about why the decision's been made to share the show now.
Right, well, at the moment, because of COVID-19 and social distancing, the need for us to remind ourselves about the importance of theatre is very kind of present in our minds, so we wanted to share it from that point of view. But also, COVID-19 is putting particular pressures on communities around the world, and in particular in the Aida refugee camp in Palestine in the West Bank. And one of the organisations that I worked with there was the Arawad Centre, who are experiencing particular financial difficulties at the moment. And there are also political decisions that are happening at the moment, which are around looking at the annexation of parts of Palestinian land to Israel, so East Jerusalem and parts of the West Bank. And that is all going on at the moment behind the screen of COVID-19. So today's streaming will be hopefully raising funding for DRAC, which is the Derby Refugee and Advice Centre, and also for Arawad. And the links will be in the beginning of this tape. So, Tilly, what I wanted to ask you was really to kind of think about really where we started with this process and contextualising that for us, please.
Yeah, well, it has been a process, hasn't it? So the show was originally commissioned in 2014, and the first ever version of it was performed in 2014 in Wirksworth, because it was a commission from Wirksworth Amnesty. And then you and I continued to work on it over a period of 2 years in total, and there were various different iterations and versions of it as we kind of put it in front of audiences and took on board feedback and made changes. Although I'm aware it's part of a longer and wider process for you in terms of your PhD research, and along with some other shows that you made. But yeah, so the recording that we're streaming tonight is actually not the final version of the show. We took this recording, obviously not knowing any of this was going to happen, but we took this recording at Nottingham Playhouse in 2015. I'm looking at you to check that's right. And after this version was recorded, the show then went to Edinburgh in 2016, and we did some more work on it before then and made some additional changes.
Yeah, and we very much wanted to develop the participation, and as the kind of process went on as we were performing it, new ideas came to us. One of the original conceptions of it was that the piece would be kind of delivered within a kind of cabaret style, and the version that you're going to see today is actually very end-on. So it was very much about thinking about how we could still, with an end-on audience, develop that element of participation with the audience.
Do you want to say a little bit about why you decided to make the show in the first place?
Yes, well, it was stimulated by a show that I created in 2010, which was called I'm No Hero, which investigated the role of the bystander. I was really interested why someone, an ordinary person, would intervene in a conflict and do something extraordinary for someone they don't know, and that the actions of one person could make a difference. So I was really stimulated by these questions, and we researched historical examples of that happening, which will be referenced in the show. I think within Acting Alone, that question starts to kind of broaden out, so that it isn't just about a bystander looking at a conflict that is happening immediately in front of you. It is about someone who actually chooses to make an intervention from an international perspective, and to really open that up in terms of what is available to us politically, that can help, that can make a difference. So that's why the reason why I went to Palestine was to continue to look at that question. And then, of course, what happened to me out there was so overwhelming that, and that I couldn't make a difference in that moment, that I was left with this question. And so the piece of theatre of Acting Alone really starts to hopefully explore different interventions that audiences could rehearse, that could make them think about their role from an international perspective in the conflict.
And we made that decision, didn't we, in the rehearsal process quite early on, I think, for a lot of the show to be verbatim and to be using the voices of the people that you met when you travelled to the West Bank.
Yeah, so apart from the traditional stories, which we're going to talk about in a moment, everything that happens in the show happened to me. And I think one of the questions at the heart of it is that, I'm just an actor. I tell stories, I perform stories, but actually, that this is about actors as well, that I witnessed saying we're just actors, we don't know what to do. Let's talk. So there were these stories that we put into the show. Do you want to just talk a little bit, Tilly, about some of the reasons why we put those in, that kind of dissected up the verbatim material?
Yeah. We made that decision to kind of weave that thread through of the traditional stories alongside the kind of the real stories and the characters and your story of going there. I think partly to kind of offer a bit of balance in that respect, but also to have those moments of almost zooming out and remembering that although this one particular conflict might feel overwhelming or too complex to engage with, or too frightening to engage with, or too far away to engage with, trying to find these stories that gave a kind of philosophical context for some kind of more universal and ancient themes around conflict, around personal responsibility, around making difficult decisions, around self-care. And I think the version that we're streaming today has more of those stories in than the final version. We took some of them out for the version that went to Edinburgh. But that was part of our thinking, I think, when we wove that thread through. The moment the audience entered the space, we were planting the seeds of the things that were going to come later in the show. If I ask you for help, will you help me? And
absolutely, and just really blurring that line between when I'm talking to them informally and then when I'm starting the show.
Again, later when you stepped off stage and kind of made it possible for the audience to step up on stage should they choose to, you'd already blurred that line a bit.
You're the reason why I get nervous. Just acting alone in front of an audience. I don't want to die up there. I'm not really going to die, but I don't want it to go horribly wrong. Perhaps someone would help me out. I went to the theatre last night and I had to go up on stage and help the actor out. I paid good money for that ticket as well. Have I done my research? Am I prepared? Do I know enough? What if in speaking out I just reveal my ignorance? She doesn't know what she's talking about. Who's she to tell this story? Who's she to have an opinion? It's the fear of not knowing enough. It's daunting. But I
here. You're here. I'm an actor, you're the audience. You're expecting me to act. Those are the rules. You've been promised a performance. Perhaps you were hoping I was going to wear a costume. Oh, you're looking at the stage thinking, is that it? This is supposed to be theatre. Maybe she's got a box of funny costumes and wigs back there. I don't know what you were expecting. The risk of making a piece of theatre an artistic response about something so complex. But what if I knew I couldn't fail? What risks would I take then? His eyes were sad, challenging, resigned. We were stuck, sat on the floor, no one moved. And this silence engulfed us. This gulf opened up between him and us. The guilty internationals. What were we doing here? This was the Freedom Bus experience. Except we were the only free people in the tent. The first one-woman show I ever did was The Lorax by Dr. Seuss. And I toured it around Derbyshire libraries. And my son, Michael, he was about 6 at the time. I could just about fit the set in my second-hand car. I had the Bubbaloots, the humming fish, the truffler trees. Oh, those truffler trees. Mile after mile in the fresh morning breeze. All my life I'd been searching for trees such as these. Oh, and I had these bright pink ladders which balanced on Michael's head. And as we were driving, I was explaining to him what the rules are when you're in the audience and it's your mum on stage. And I have to say that despite his age, he was actually really well behaved in the show. Oh, a couple of things went wrong. I missed a line, I fluffed a cue. I mean, I was doing everything, the puppetry, the sound cues, the childcare. Acting alone, it's like multitasking madness. And afterwards, I packed everything back up into the car. I gave Michael his packed lunch, balanced the ladders back on his head, and we set off to the next library in Swadlincote. And on the way, I'm talking about how the show's gone and what went wrong. And Michael's listening intently. We get to the next show, and I just remind him, before the show, I say, now, Michael, when we get to the end of the show, and I ask the children if they've got any questions, it's not for you to join in. It's for the other children in the audience. And he nods, and he sits down, and he watches his mother do exactly the same show again. And when we get to the end, I say, so, has anyone got any questions for me? And Michael's hand shots up. He's forgotten the rules. So I ignored him. So I answer all the other children's questions, and some of the mums are getting a bit confused because they're thinking, why is this actor ignoring this one child? And then eventually there's nobody left, just Michael, and his hand's still there. So I relent, and I say, yes, what's your question? And his face, it was this genuine picture of curiosities. And what went wrong? And I froze, because I didn't have the answers. I wasn't prepared for this question. And it's the fear that I don't have the answers that it's kept me stuck for about a year now. It's been like an artistic paralysis. You see, there was this other show I did based on a Michael Morpurgo story called The Kites Are Flying, and it's set in the West Bank. So Maggie, and who's my director, we did a bit of research. We went to the West Bank. We went to refugee camps. We met some extraordinary people. We came back, we did the show, and well, afterwards I just felt overwhelmed. I was exhausted by everything that had happened in Palestine. And you see, I told the Michael Morpurgo story, but this other story, this other book had opened up, and I couldn't just walk away from it. And that's where I've been. Stuck. Afraid. But the people, the women that inspired me, got me interested in Palestine in the first place. Irena Sendler, Rachel Corrie. They were anything but afraid. In fact, they stared death literally in the face. And in Rachel Corrie's case, she stared at it until it consumed her. Stop! We're the International Solidarity Movement! These are civilian homes! Stop! You're violating international law! Stop! Stop! Her name was Rachel Corrie. She was 23 when she died in a war zone in a city called Rafah in the Gaza Strip. She was a writer. She was naive. She was pig-headed. She was courageous. She was my daughter. She was crushed by Israeli soldiers driving a US-built Caterpillar bulldozer. Her death was announced as a strip of text across the bottom of my TV screen. It's hard to know that your child has died so far away. You hope she wasn't frightened, that you could have held her. We lost our 10-year legal battle with the Israeli government. They said it was an accident, that they didn't see her. People ask me what sustains me to carry on with my work. It is the knowledge that I am not alone, that one by one we become many. And when I talk to her now, I say, sweetheart, you have no idea. We're so proud of you, me and Dad. I didn't understand in the beginning, but I understand now. I say these women were fearless, but is that true? I mean, to do something courageous, do you not feel fear, terror even? The iconic punk musician Viv Albertine, she said recently in an interview that people often described her as fearless, but it wasn't true. She was afraid, but she did the things that scared her anyway. Michael was worried about me going to Palestine. A few people were. In truth, so was I. The situation over there is so volatile. It can explode at any moment. Was I being naive? Putting myself into a situation that is so complex? Is it possible for anyone to fully understand? I was originally going to go on my own, but thinking it through, I asked Maggie, my director, to come with me too. Mature women, surely we'd be fine. We wouldn't be able to take any contact details about the people we were visiting with us. No travel books about Palestine. And we'd have to try to delete off the internet anything suspicious. If the Israeli security guards thought that we were going to the West Bank to make a show that was in any way critical of Israel, we could be viewed as a security threat. We could be detained for up to 24 hours, possibly even deported. We rehearsed our lines. Our lies. Lying to the authorities is not something that I find particularly easy, even as an actor. I had this audition once for Coronation Street and they wanted a northern actress, so I thought, right, I'll be northern all day. So I went along and they said, where have you come from? I said, Matlock Bath. I didn't even live there at the time. It just sounded more northern. Anyway, I got the job, but then I had to be northern for 2 whole days. And that's the trouble when you lie. You have to keep up the act. You have to stick to the script. When Maggie and I landed at Tel Aviv, she was a little bit ahead of me in the queue, first to go up to the armed security guards in the booth. In her bag, she's packed bird-watching books, binoculars, even a flyer for a Jewish dance workshop she's done once. And I'm holding my breath. She's through. She's through. Now it's my turn to go up to the security guards and lie. Why are you coming to Israel? I'm coming to an international children's theatre festival. My heart is pounding, my palms are sweating, and I'm fumbling with my false papers. He takes them from me. Have you been to Israel before? No. Yes, I have, yes. Kibbutz, in 1978. And I want to tell him, Ramat Rakal. But he just waves me through. Oh, right, yeah. It's the next bit. It's the next bit where they sit you down, they check you out on the internet, they shine a light in your eye till you sweat. No, we just walk up to another desk. Welcome, says another armed security guard. He takes the passport, tears off the barcode from the newly issued visas, just waves us through. To baggage collection? Our bags are already chugging freely around the conveyor belt. Oh yeah, it's the next bit. It's the next bit when they take all your luggage apart. They take all your luggage apart, they check you out on the internet, they shine a light on your eye. But no, we're walking through nothing to declare. There's only 10 meters to go. I'm thinking, just keep walking, Ava. And I'm still waiting for this hand on my shoulder and this voice that says, would you like to come and walk this way? We've got a few extra questions for you. We weren't quite convinced by your performance. We sat and ate a hot meal on the tarpaulin-covered ground. The internationals sit cross-legged by oil lamps, talking excitedly about what they've done in the day. After the meal, we're asked to leave the tent while they set up for the performance. It's dark outside now. Black. The only light is from the stars. Thin crescent moon. There's no sanitation here, no electricity in this Bedouin camp. Oh, and in the distance, there's the floodlights from an illegal Israeli settlement. From here, it looks more like a prison. Not sure if it's keeping the settlers in or the Palestinians out. It's just wind. The odd goat. And then the sudden, terrifying suck of low-flying military aircraft. Even here, in the middle of nowhere, we are watched. They are watched. We're called back into the tent. The actors stand prepared for the performance, and a Palestinian farmer stands up to tell his story. He's old. He stands erect. He wears traditional Palestinian headdress. He waits patiently while each section of his story is carefully translated for the international audience. He talks of how he walks each day to collect water for his herd of goats. What if someone asked you for help and you couldn't do it? You couldn't fit it in. I can't do it, I can't fit it in. I've got a few commitments. It's just that going forward, I've got a window in December. It's just that I've got to work at the moment. I've got to pay off my debts, pay off the mortgage, the kids' university fees. I'm saving for a pension. I need a holiday. I need a new kitchen. And I'm in between relationships, in between jobs, in between meals. No, I can't do it. No. I said no. Does that make me a bad person? I said no. I have to live with myself. I have to live with that, feeling like an ungenerous person. Every time there's an earthquake, a waging war, an epidemic of Ebola, another boat capsizes with migrants, another food bank opens, and I don't give of my time, my money, myself. You see, the paradox is that as an actor, you never say no to anything. You always say yes. Can you tango? Yes. Can you abseil? Yes. Can you speak French? Oui. Can you ride a horse? Of course. You do these jobs, you end up thinking, how on earth did I end up here? I was doing this job, filming in a courtroom, and I went to do some research. I thought I'll go to the county court in Nottingham. And the solicitor said to me, so Miss Hunt, would you like to go in courtroom number 1, where it's armed robbery, stabbings or murder? Or courtroom number 2, where it's GBH, drug dealers and fraud? Or courtroom number 3, where it's shoplifting and a parking offence? Courtroom number 1. Except that when I got in there, it was the case of a father who had sexually abused his daughters. We had to sit there listening over and over again to these grotesque, intimate details of what he had allegedly done. And I felt sick. This was real. I wanted to stand up and walk out, but we'd been told by the judge that if we even as much as sneezed, we could be done for contempt of court. So I just had to sit there in my shitty little shame of wanting to listen to someone else's drama, someone else's pain. Not in my time. Not in your time, but in another time. Before the world became what it is today, there was a Native American chief. He had 3 sons. He couldn't decide who should succeed him, so he gathered them together and he said, I want you to climb to the top of that mountain. Bring back something that would help us lead our people. A few days go by. The first son returns. He says, Father, I have found a mound of flint to make spear points and arrowheads. Our people will never be afraid of their enemies again. The next day, the second son returns. Father, I have found a mound of wood. our people will always be able to cook and keep themselves warm. A few days go by, and finally the third son returns, completely empty-handed. He says, "Father, when I got to the summit, I found that it was completely barren. But when I looked onto the horizon, I saw this beautiful land, valleys and hills and rivers and streams, animals and birds and fish. It was so beautiful. I wanted to go there. I didn't want to return." The old chief's eyes blazed, and he grasped his third son in his arms, and he said, "You shall succeed me." And he thinks, "My first two sons brought me worthy things, necessary things. But my third son has a vision. He's seen a better land, a promised land, and he burns with a desire to go there." I'm just an actor. This is just theatre. And what good is theatre when the world needs action and all I'm offering is my acting skills? David Hare, the playwright, he said he felt exactly the same when he went to Israel. He said that when people asked him why he'd come, he said he felt ridiculous saying to come to write a play. When others go to fight, they leave their homes in the UK to go and fight. I'd like to read you his description of Israel in his play Via Dolorosa. Israel is first and foremost a cause, the cause being a patch of land north to south on the eastern side of the Mediterranean, lying like a small brown anchovy set down on a school atlas, to which the most persecuted people of all times, after the matchless catastrophe of the Holocaust, rushed in the perfectly reasonable belief that they would never be safe until they had a country of their own. So why am I here? Why did I go there? And can one person make a difference? Irena Sendler. I was on a plane going to Jersey, doing another acting job, and I was reading in The Guardian this article about this woman called Irena Sendler. She was Polish, Catholic, a social worker, living in Warsaw at the time of the German invasion. You hear stories of extermination camps. It's impossible. How could they do such a thing? But what if it's true? And we do nothing. Will that make us as bad as the Nazis? By 1942, there's almost 500,000 Jewish people in the Warsaw Ghetto. Irena feels compelled to act. The Germans are terrified there'll be an outbreak of typhoid in the ghetto, so she creates this character, Sister Jolanta, a typhoid nurse, under the pretense of immunizing children and babies. She can get into the ghetto. Mrs. Silverman? My name is Sister Jolanta. Look, we don't have much time. I expect you've heard the stories. The families that are disappearing. The camps, Treblinka. Look, I can't save you all. Only the children. I could come back tomorrow, give your daughter something to sleep, carry her out in a potato sack with my medical bag. She'll be placed with Mr. It's probably best if I don't tell you it. Look, she'll be given new papers. Formally adopted as Christian. It's her only chance. I can't save you all. Only the children. How did those women do it? How did those women hand over their sons and daughters to a complete stranger, knowing that they would never see them again? Would I have done it? Would I have handed Michael over? If I knew it was the only way he would survive, I would have done it, wouldn't I? A year later, Irena is recruited by Żegota. It's a resistance movement. On the 20th of October 1943, she's up late one night with her friend Johanna. They're writing down the children's names together with their new identities. The house is suddenly surrounded by soldiers. Irena is arrested. She's tortured by the Gestapo. They break both her feet, both her legs, but she never gives them the children's names. Unbeknownst to anyone, Johanna has taken those names. She's put them into jars, and she buries the jars in Irena's garden. After the war, I went back to my garden, the apple tree, and I dug up the jars. I listed the children's names, one by one. There were over 2,500. I spent years trying to track the parents. I didn't find a single one. But I'm no hero. And I should have done more. This woman's story had been obscured for almost 60 years. And I had a question too. Why would this ordinary person do something so extraordinary for someone they don't even know? We created a show from her story. We called it I'm No Hero, Irena's words, and we wove into it the story of Rachel Corrie, two women who had stood up, taken action, risked their lives to save others. We opened the show in 2009, the same week that the Israeli tanks drove into the Gaza Strip. And I was contacted by a woman called Lily Pullman. She was a Holocaust survivor, and she had known Irena Sendler. I arranged to meet her. Lily told me that her mother, her brother, and her father were all killed in the camps. And that as an adult, she had met Irena. She told me that for those 2,500 children whose lives that she had saved, there was one person's childhood who had been completely sacrificed, her own daughter. They were completely estranged. And when I thought about it, I mean, what effect would it have on you if you never saw your mother? She was constantly on the run. Maybe that's why Irena had said that she was no hero. She'd known what it had cost her. The one person that she should have been there for. Why should the rules be different for Irena's daughter? I was like a sponge. I was writing everything down that Lily was telling me, and I felt so close to Lily, and Lily was so excited, and she said that we could perform the show on the anniversary of Irena's birthday at the Polish Embassy, and I told her all about taking the show to the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, and how there was this other story woven into it, all about Rachel Corrie, and her face dropped, and her jaw hardened. And she looked straight at me and she said, "Why must this woman's story be in the show?" I betrayed her. Lily had no time for Rachel or anyone else who would defend Palestinian lives. I tried to defend Rachel. Well, she didn't have to. My palms are sweating. My heart is pounding. And I changed the subject. I finished the meeting and I left. I never spoke to Lily again. And the performance in the Polish Embassy never happened. Palestinian farmer's story is told, and the actors are acting out his story. We're sitting in this tent, and it's all cosy, and we feel safe, albeit with the military flying overhead, but we're listening to stories. And the actors are leaping about on stage, showing the Palestinian farmer's struggle to get water, and the Israeli soldiers. No water today. The actor, acting out the Palestinian farmer, tries to protest. But my goats. The Israeli soldiers put their guns to his head. Pour it away. The Palestinian farmer pours the water away onto the sun-baked ground at the soldiers' feet. He takes the empty bucket back towards his herd of goats, back past the illegal settlement where the water flows freely from the taps and the children splash in backyard pools. The performance is finished. The Palestinian farmer looks at the actors. We, the audience, look at the actors. Then they begin to cry. Not in my time. Not in your time. In another time. Before the world became what it is today. There was a water bearer, and he carried a yoke with 2 pots of water up a steep hill to his master's house each day. One pot had a crack in it, and it always lost half of the water. The other pot always delivered the full amount. After many years, the cracked pot was miserable. He said, "I'm sorry. I'm sorry I don't accomplish what the perfect pot does." The water bearer said, "Why? Why do you apologize?" The cracked pot said, "Well, each day I lose half my water. I cause you more work because of my flaw." And the old man smiled, and he said, Look at the beautiful flowers that grow on the side of the path where I carry you. Those beautiful flowers are there because of the water you leak. There are no flowers on the side of the perfect pot.
I didn't hear what you said. I didn't want to say what I wanted to talk to you.
Taking care of myself is not self-indulgence. It is self-preservation, and that is an act of political warfare. It's Audre Lorde. So what am I doing here, standing in front of you? You know, I have sleepless nights worrying about tonight, thinking, am I going to be able to remember my lines? Is it going to be any good? Am I going to be able to hold on to my accents? It's the fear. We all feel it, the palms sweating, the heart beating, and the voice in your head that says you can't do it. You might die out there. Just go home now and we'll pretend it never happened. Do you know, one of the funniest, scariest, not the funniest, well, it might be funny, but it's also very scary, but was doing a stand-up slot at Jongleurs, being a stand-up comic. Oh, it was terrible. I got heckled off stage. It was completely humiliating. And, I mean, if I asked you now to stand up and tell a joke, would you? No, well, here's a joke for you. Well, you never know. Here's a joke for you. Courtesy of Andy Hamilton, okay? So 3 words that should never be in the same sentence. Blair, envoy, peace. In East Jerusalem, Maggie and I met a different Tony. He was a lawyer, and he'd worked for the UN for 36 years. And he was originally from Australia. It's when you leave you have to be careful. Wipe all your computer files, delete all the photos. I don't understand, I say. How can they delete, how can they get onto my computer without my permission? They do what they like. And the British Embassy will do nothing. And we knew this. Zoe, she's a British theatre director. She works at the Freedom Theatre. She told us that she was regularly strip searched at the airport. Once, they confiscated her laptop. It turned up 3 days later at Luton Airport. It looked more like so many bits, it looked more like a bag of pick and mix. Tony continues. Tony Blair, he's the most corrupt politician of the lot. He receives annually a £2 million retainer from JP Morgan, the investment bankers, plus another 500,000 as being the Middle Eastern envoy. Never even meets the Palestinians. Obviously Blair's resigned now. He accomplished his goals. Peace in the Middle East, tick. Sitting in a hotel room in Jerusalem for 8 years earning millions, tick. The Australians and the Americans, they're all in bed with the Israeli government, which is mainly funded by the Russian Jews. And the Israelis, they've got enough nuclear weapons to wipe out most of Europe if they wanted. The UN is just part of the problem. If they didn't supply humanitarian aid to the Palestinians in the refugee camps, the Israeli government would be forced under international law to supply food, water, medical aid. They wouldn't be able to sustain it. They'd be forced economically into a solution. And if the Israeli government didn't supply humanitarian aid, Tony trails off. But his knowledge of European history since the First World War, it's overwhelming. I mean, he's very clear that all the seeds of the conflict in the Middle East, Iraq, Syria, they all stem from the greed and blindness of the politicians who sat around the table at the Paris Peace Conference in 1919. Russia, America, France, Britain, and Gertrude Bell. Gertrude Bell, she took a ruler and she drew straight lines across Europe, the Middle East, and North Africa. carving across countries, tribes, and religions. Just hold on to that for me, please. All to benefit the trade of Britain. Neat little boxes. Thank you. Straight lines. It's just simpler that way, isn't it? Straight lines drawn with a ruler. Neat little boxes. Them and us. Goodies, baddies. Irena Sendler, Rachel Corrie, Lily Palmer. The empire. The colony. The arrogance, the decadence, the destruction, the repetition. Thank you. Could you just, actually, could you help him? Could you wind it up properly? You might have to come up. I don't know. Thank you. And the unforgiving optimism of people who need to escape. That's it, that's great. And while Tony is talking, he's framed by these UN maps on the wall. They show the occupation of the Palestinian land since the creation of Israel in 1948. And it's shocking. The encroachment, the settlements that are internationally recognized as illegal. And they're filled with Eastern European economic migrants with a distant Jewish relative, all promised a brave new life if they'll only just sit in a sea of resentment, shoring up the tiny Israeli population of less than 7 million. Not in my time. Not in your time. In another time. Before the world became what it is today, there was a king in a splendid palace, and he had a magnificent city. Him and his minister would stand and eat puffed rice and honey. A tiny trickle of honey dripped from his puffed rice on to the window ledge. The minister rushed to get a servant to wipe it up, but the king said, "It's only a tiny drop of honey. It's not our problem." The tiny drop of honey trickled down the outside of the splendid palace onto the ground below. Soon a buzzing fly landed on it, and out shot the tongue of a lizard, onto which a cat pounced on it and then was attacked by a dog. Meowing and barking erupted. The minister rushed to the window, but the king said, "They belong to the market people. Don't interfere. It's not our problem." Now the cat owner came out, saw their cat being attacked, picked up a broom, started whacking the dog. The dog owner came out, saw their dog being attacked, picked up a broom, started whacking the cat. Soon other market people joined in and a fight broke out and the police were called. The minister rushed to the window and the king said, "Have some more puffed rice and honey. It's not our problem." The people started attacking the police. Now no one could remember why they'd started and who was right and who was wrong. And soon civil war broke out and the army were called and the city descended into a pile of rubble and smoke. And the next morning when the minister and the king looked out of the window, their jaws hung in horror. There was nothing left of this magnificent city. "Oh," said the king, "perhaps that tiny drop of honey was our problem." Palestinian farmer looks looks at the actors. Their tears are clearly traceable down their cheeks. But this isn't acting. This is real. This is awkward. They speak in Arabic, but none of the words that I have carefully learnt before coming out, and their distress is evident. Finally, a translator steps forward and says, "We are ashamed to be Palestinians. We're just actors." The actors stand completely humiliated. They've broken the rules. Then the Palestinian farmer turns around and he looks straight at us. Sometimes I don't tell people I'm an actor. Well, you always get asked the same questions, like, are you doing anything lately? Have you been on the telly? Have I seen you in anything? It's not that I'm complaining, but it's just that in truth, you're probably just sitting by the phone waiting for it to ring, thinking I'm never going to work again. And then when the phone does ring, you have to dash down to London, you have to come up with some costume you don't have in your wardrobe, because casting directors have got no imagination. You have to go dressed as the part. You have to learn a script, an accent, you have to learn to ride a horse. It goes like this. Hello? Tomorrow? Well, what's it for? A commercial? A bath lift? Maybe my career needs a lift. For elderly people? I'm not old enough, am I? Well, what's the money? I'll do it. The most exposing job I've ever done in my entire life, sitting naked in a bath, strategically trying to rearrange bubbles to cover my most vulnerable bits. You see, there was actually 3 of us at one point. That was the makeup woman, the director, and myself, thrashing around in the water, trying to make as many bubbles as possible to hang on to the little bit of dignity I had left. I sat there just watching my career go down the plug. But the work that means something to me, nobody asks me about that. The CND plays, the IRA play about the British courts in Northern Ireland. Or the week I flew into Moscow, the week the Soviet Union collapsed. It was August 1991. The communist hardliners have arrested Gorbachev. He was on holiday in the Crimea, and they send the tanks down the streets of Moscow towards the Parliament building where Yeltsin's barricaded himself in. The people of Moscow take to the streets, blockade the underpass, and the military kill 3 men. 24 hours later, the coup is over, and I fly into Moscow with a group of young people and a play called Free the Spirit. The flowers are still in the middle of the road for those 3 men. And that night, I sit behind the barricades and drink tea with these men who have stood up for what they believed in, who were willing to die for what they believed in. And I felt completely humbled. Here I am making theatre. They're starting a revolution through non-violent resistance. Like Juliana Macanus. He wanted to create theatre, non-violent resistance in Palestine. He set up the Freedom Theatre. He wanted to have positive ways that young Palestinians in the Jenin refugee camp, positive ways that they could express themselves. Except that in 2011 he's assassinated outside the theatre and no one has ever been arrested for his murder. Zoe, the British theatre director who was regularly strip searched, she told us that out of this loss they created the Freedom Bus experience for internationals to have the opportunity to listen and see Palestinian stories. Now Now, Maggie and I weren't on the Freedom Bus experience straight away. We were in Jerusalem getting lost. And we stopped this man. And could you tell us, please, how to get to Damascus Gate bus station? It's in the Arab Quarter. And he replies, why? Why do you want to go there? Who are you? What are you doing? We called a taxi in the end. And I kept thinking about Palestinians and Israelis. I mean, in East Jerusalem, they live practically on top of each other, but they don't see each other. They see the enemy. Nurit Peled-Elan, she's an Israeli academic, a human rights activist. Her own daughter was killed in 1997 in a Palestinian terrorist attack. And as a mother, she could have asked for revenge, but what she said at the time was that no real mother would wish that on another mother. That motherhood unites and is a uniting force that cuts across religion, cuts across any differences. She wanted to understand how liberal Israeli children became, in her words, horrible monsters when they joined the army. So she conducts this comprehensive scientific analysis of the language used in Israeli school textbooks. There are no images of Palestinian doctors, teachers, or children. The only images are of Palestinian terrorists or as primitive foreigners. Masked juveniles throwing stones or old men with their oxen plowing fields of mud. Palestinians are either a threat or a problem. And in the geography textbooks, the maps, there are no Palestinian cities marked. The whole of the West Bank is represented as scrubland, land yet to be occupied. This is all the children learn. I decided to do my own research. I was having difficulty finding the camp, the refugee camp in Bethlehem, so I went to Google Maps, source of all knowledge, and there's nothing there. Palestinian families have been living in the camp since 1948. Type in Aida refugee camp, and it comes back saying, we cannot find this place. So how were we going to find our way to Bethlehem? Well, we followed a star on a donkey. And we met Dr. Abdul Fattah Abzura, who had created the Arawad Center for children and the community. Abed was born in the camp. He spent his entire life fighting for the right to return, the right for Palestinians to return to their homes. He believes that resistance is beautiful. He believes in the arts, theatre, poetry, songs, stories, music. He creates acts of performance, artistic activism, cultural acts of terrorism. And we read him the Michael Morpurgo story, and the children drew these pictures.
So at this point in the show, Ava passed round the pictures that were drawn by the children in the Arawad Centre during the workshop she ran there.
And what's interesting is the difference between the pictures that the girls drew and the pictures that the boys drew. Some of the pictures, they've actually drawn themselves flying in the sky, almost like they can rise above this conflict. And for those pictures that are monochrome, they were mainly drawn by the boys, but all of the children draw the wall as it actually is. But the images of the children are very much mainly with smiles, and also the actual images of the Palestinian flag flying above the wall. And
we asked them to make kites, and I asked them a question. I said, if you had a dream, what's your dream? And if you were a kite and you could fly over the security barrier, what would you do? And this child's hand shot up. And I said, yes. He said, I want to go to Jerusalem. Jerusalem's about 7 kilometres away. Just put there, just put there. Thank you. We did actually go to the Israeli Children's Theatre Festival for our part of our alibi, but we did see a play, a one-man show, probably the most moving piece of theatre I've seen. It's called Samir and Yonatan. It's about 2 little boys, a Palestinian and Israeli, and they meet in a hospital. And they become friends and they play with each other and have adventures down the corridors. And they look through Yonatan's telescope up at the stars. And they realise that everything in the universe is made of carbon. That we're all the same. That we're all made of stardust. And I thought it wasn't appropriate behaviour for a member of the audience, but if this show could tour around to Israeli schools and children could see Palestinian children were the same as them, then surely that would challenge Neuritz's research. But no Israeli child has ever seen that show, because no teacher would book it. And a colleague of mine said to me, if we create a world in which we fear each other, then what future do we create for our children? Not in my time, not in your time, in another time, before the world became what it is today, there was a band of monkeys, and it was a bitterly cold night. And the monkeys agreed that they would freeze to death unless they imitated a group of humans around a campfire. Now, the monkeys didn't actually know how to make fire. But one of the monkeys said they should collect firewood, glowworms, fireflies, twigs, dry leaves, and blow, hoping to produce a flame. Now, one monkey thought itself a little superior and was at a slight distance and started taunting them. I don't think you make fire like that. I don't think humans make fire like that. But the band of monkeys ignored him and they continued to blow, concentrating on how lovely and warm they would be when the fire finally caught. And the monkey, who thought himself superior, continued to taunt them. But as the night grew colder and colder, the taunts grew less and less. And in the morning, they found him curled in a crevice, his mouth and beard rimmed with ice. He'd frozen to death. Now the band of monkeys hadn't been successful in making fire, but they had the one thing that the dead monkey did not, and it had kept them alive. Some adults have given up hope. They say that there will always be conflict in the Middle East, that there are simply too many people that don't want peace. But I can't believe that. And what if I'm right and they are wrong? What if a piece of theatre like Samir and Yonatan could make a difference, could help to make peace? I want to make a difference, says the Israeli soldier, talking to the 2 young men on the hostel's concrete balcony overlooking the chaos of the Tel Aviv traffic below. Oh yeah, says one of the lads. How's that going to happen? leather boots, khaki trousers, sleeves rolled up, tanned Mediterranean skin. He looks like an Israeli, but he's an Englishman. He's in his early 20s, about the same age as Michael. They leave their homes in the UK to go and fight. The two young lads are talking about the West Bank. I've been, I say, trying to force my way into their conversation. And they're talking about the 430-mile security barrier that divides the West Bank from Israel. One of the young lads says, "It's like the Berlin Wall." No, it's not, I say. It's like apartheid. And the Israeli soldier from Birmingham agrees. I was born in Israel, but I grew up in Birmingham. My mother's got dual citizenship. Just finished university, gonna go into engineering, but I've got to serve my time in the Israeli military first. The army are investing 4 years of training in me, identifying the underground tunnels from Gaza to Egypt. You know, the only time I've ever had to cock my gun was in a Jewish settler. We were out on patrol, talking to these Palestinian farmers. They offered us coffee. Then, about 500 metres away, these settlers start to come towards us, start hurling abuse, throwing stones, shouting, "Get rid of that Arab scum!" So I held my gun up to my eye and I said, "Stop! And I'll shoot!" We all have to serve our time at the checkpoints. I believe in Israel. Watching a Palestinian mother crying because she's holding her child and she's got to get him to the hospital and she's not got the correct passes, so you have to turn her away. I didn't want to do it, but it's my job, and I believe in Israel. I believe in Israel. And I'm listening to it. And I'm thinking, is he Israeli? Is he English? We talked for over an hour and I say goodbye to him, but my stomach, I'm disturbed by this conversation. And every time I hear on the news about the IDF destroying those underground tunnels from Gaza to Egypt, I think of him, that Israeli soldier from Birmingham. They leave their homes in the UK to go and fight. Their schools in Bethnal Green to become jihadi brides. Their homes in Manchester to save the children. Not in my time, not in your time, in another time. Before the world became what it is today, there was a rabbi and his students. The rabbi said, "How will you know when night has ended and day has begun?" The student said, is it when you can tell the difference between a sheep and a dog in the distance? No. Is it when you can tell the difference between a peach tree and a fig tree? No. What is it then? It's when you can look on the face of another human being and say that he or she is your brother or sister. Because unless you can do that, it doesn't matter what time it is, it will always be night. Our last night in the refugee camp, we had a meal with Salim. We sang songs with the children, and we sort of forgot we were in a refugee camp. So suddenly we realised we've only got 5 minutes to get back to the road. We pile into Salim's van and we shoot off down the road, turning the corner, only to see the last bus to East Jerusalem has already left. Salim decides that drastic action is necessary. He switches lanes, starts driving straight at the bus for a head-on collision. The bus screeches to a halt. We pile out, shout our goodbyes, tumble onto the bus and then walk sheepishly to the back. We've just hijacked a bus. We're convinced that we're going to be arrested for an act of terrorism. But nobody seems in the least bit bothered. And when we get to the checkpoint, to the security barrier, the Israeli soldiers come on and they get all the Palestinians off at gunpoint to check their papers, leaving us sat on the bus. The soldiers they look about 13. They carry their guns on their shoulders like most UK teenagers carry their rucksacks to school. Maggie's going home a few days before me. This gives me enough time to make duplicates of all the photographs and film, notes, to evidence our attendance at the Children's Theatre Festival. After everything that Zoe has told us about being strip searched at the airport, we have to be prepared for everything. Clean pants. Were we going to get away with this? Were we going to get home safely? Would they find out what we'd really been doing? The fear I felt going to the airport, it's the same fear I feel now standing in front of you. Hoping that I'm going to get away with this, that it's going to end well. Because we're coming to the end and I'm running out of script. We're coming to the climax. Palestinian farmer turns around and he looks straight at us. You internationals, you come here, you listen to our stories, but what do? You want to help? Come with me. Come with me now. Come and help me get water from my goats. Stop the Israeli soldiers from turning me away. Come with me. And what if I had gone then? What if I had gone and got water for his herd of goats, stood up to the Israeli soldiers? I would have had to have stayed the next day, wouldn't I? And the next. And the next. Leave my home in the UK to go and fight? Risk my life like Rachel Corrie? What about my responsibility to Michael? So is this all just talk? Can I live and say yes? Can I live with myself if I say no? This is where I've been left. This is the book I couldn't close. I mean, was I being naive? Getting involved in other people's conflicts, interfering? If I had done something, would it have been through acting or activism? And what if by doing this very play now, here, now, that I'm preventing myself going back to Israel again to help those farmers or children in the camps? This silence engulfed us, this gulf opened up between him and us. And if I had stood up, would I have been acting alone? Would anyone have joined in with me? Oh, we were all just too afraid we didn't know what the rules were for an international audience. Come with me. My palms are sweating, My heart is racing, and I have this voice in my head that says, you can't do it. You can't do it. You might die out there. You just go home now and we'll pretend it never happened. But he's asking for my help. I'm asking for yours. Help me. I knew I had to do something, which is why I'm standing here now. I don't know how this evening ends. I haven't got the answers. I don't know how we should end this show.